I'm Maureen Ballatori, and this is Spilled Salt, a podcast on the thrills and spills from the food, beverage, and agriculture industries. Today's guest is Matias Figliozzi. He's the co-founder and CEO of UNIBAIO. For my local listeners, you may know Matias and UNIBAIO as the $1 million top prize winner of the Grow New York AgTech and Food Tech competition that is based in and growing in upstate New York. UNIBAIO is a biotechnology company based in Argentina that develops innovative microparticles to improve the performance of sustainability of agrochemicals. UNIBAIO's delivery system is versatile and compatible with both biological and synthetic molecules, covering fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides. The result is a remarkable reduction of 80% in the need for active ingredients in their formulations. But this is more than just UNIBAIO's story. As always, it is the founder's story. So this is Matias's story. It is the story of how Matias's passion for biotechnology and sustainability and government and economic development, for that matter, catapulted an idea on a global scale. Enjoy the conversation. Good morning, Matias. How are you?
Very good. Good morning, Maureen. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thanks for joining me for this. I'm so excited to tell your story today.
Yeah, me too. It's my pleasure. It's always a pleasure to share our story and hopefully inspire someone else.
Yes, I'm sure we will. Thank you for taking the time. So I always like to start with your personal background. So we're going to talk about UNIBAIO as a company, but I want to talk about you as well and kind of understand your trajectory. So did you start your career in government?
Yeah, I did. I am an economist, so my formation is in economics, macroeconomics, so managing countries and developing a country. So my ideal first job, was trying to work for government and try to tailor policies to shape the future of Argentina. I'm originally from Argentina, and probably you don't know, but Argentina is always in economic crisis. So that's triggered my interest on understanding why. Why do we have all these problems all the time and trying to solve it? So I started in government, yes, but working for government, I started to learn about the startup world and the other options that we can also shape the future and the present from the private sector and from innovation. So I fell in love with this journey I'm following now.
So before you continue into that trajectory of the startup world, what about the startup world was intriguing to you when you were working in government? Like, what was the first time you noticed, oh, that's really interesting and something that I might want to do instead of the government route?
Yeah, so when I finished my degree, I got an internship and then an offer position in government. And I was working in an office that was promoting the development of small companies and startups, but mainly with global mindset. So they were all focused on flourishing trade, international development. And normally when you are thinking in global market, you are thinking in the most innovative type of companies. So not the small coffee shop that you can find in the corner, but just something else that can export a service or a product. So during the time I was in the government side, so I'm helping others to develop their business. And one of the policies that we designed in the government was, why don't we organize trade show and a commercial mission to the US to show our entrepreneurs Silicon Valley and do networking, connect with investors and all other innovators so they can develop their ideas faster and bigger and be more ambitious. So going to the edge of innovation. So that was an amazing experience for me because I was young, I didn't know about all this ecosystem and what was happening. And trying to understand how to help other startups and how to connect them to US and Silicon Valley started to plant a seed on me that, oh, maybe I can do that. Maybe that is even better than trying to fix our reality in Argentina from the government side, or maybe we can help to shift it from the private sector, from creating a startup that can innovate, and the innovation always create economic development. So the goal is the same. but if it's a different tool or a different role.
Yeah. I I love that you just said that. I have always had an interest in economic development. I can't say that I have a passion for government in particular, right? Like I think
Yeah.
there's a that's a ball of wax I'm not going to open. But
Yeah.
I love economic development for the exact reason that you just mentioned, where private companies can make an immense difference in the way communities function and the jobs that people have opportunities to have and that sort of thing. And so what was the first experience that you had where you noticed that you were making that difference? Because you said you left government and you went into the startup world, right?
Yeah. So two comments. First, something I know that you were mentioning, but I didn't like working on government because sooner or later I realized that I needed to get involved in politics. So there's a lot of the
Yeah.
government work that is related to politics, and many of the decision making is tailored by politics decisions. So it's not necessarily what is the best for, like theoretically the best for
Right.
community. So it's more about what is possible in terms of negotiation with other parties and whoever has the power.
Yes. Mhm.
So that creates limits. But when you think on the private sector and innovation, the only limit is you.
Mhm.
Or at least you don't need to ask necessarily permission to anyone to try to shift and modify things. Because of my background in economics, I knew that everything that I do with my company also reflects in my community. Because if I
Right,
have a
exactly.
successful company, I have more employees with better salaries. Because if we are an innovation company, we have higher productivity, so we can pay or afford paying higher salaries. Higher salaries means more consumption locally. So that also relates to economic development. This is something you
Yes.
don't learn from when you are doing a startup. It's something that I had in my background. So that adds an additional layer of relevance for me personally
Mhm.
on why to do a startup. It's not
Mhm.
only what we're
Yeah.
doing at UNIBAIO, but also like theoretically, it is always good because we're also helping to develop an economy.
Yeah. And I would say not just you said it gives you like a different layer of relevance, but it also gives you a different layer of passion and understanding because your interest is in communities, right?
Hmm.
From the macroeconomic standpoint. And so you're just kind of going about it a little bit of a different
Yes.
way. So tell us about what happened what was your first leap when you left government and went into a startup? What was the first one?
Yeah. So I quit my government work to do the first attempt of the startup with my sister and brother-in-law. Working with family is difficult,
Yes.
but we were aiming to. It was 2011, so it was the beginning of social network. At that time,
Mhm.
Facebook wasn't even selling advertising, so it was very the
Wow.
beginnings. Yeah, and we were doing direct to farmer, from farmers direct to your home, selling greens, vegetables, and fruits, avoiding all the chains in the value chain, the commercialization chain.
Yep.
And that way we can avoid the cost that implies all these steps, but also sell fresher. Because when you sell fruits and vegetables in a supermarket, the biggest cost is the waste. Around 40%
Mm,
of what the supermarkets buy is wasted because it gets raw before anyone buy it.
right.
So it's the biggest cost. So when we realize with a very economic mindset that the biggest cost was the waste, the best way to solve the waste was first selling directly to consumers and then buying to the farmers. So
Mhm.
we twisted it, we put it in the other way, the normal selling, and we created a web page that was only advertised through social network. We were using Facebook at that time, and we were promoting and making like social network advertising, making people advertise what we do, and it was really successful at the time. We were publishing all type of media. We were selling really cheap and fresh fruits, only by shifting the idea on how to buy and sell fruits and
Right.
vegetables. Um, my goal was building a startup that was scaling up this idea.
Yeah.
Scaling this from Buenos Aires. I was living in Buenos Aires at the time, to Latin America and then globally if possible, because I realized that at that time no one was doing something like this. Now it's more common, but at the time was something cool. Um, but it didn't work. So it works. They keep going. The business is still on
Oh,
business.
great. Yeah,
Yes, but I step aside. So it didn't work
I
for
see.
me.
Uh-huh. And is
The
that because
relationship didn't work.
the relationship didn't work in what way? Like it was not going to reach the scalability that you were looking for where you really had this global focus?
Kind of. That was part of the deal because I was doing this because I wanted to do what I learned working for government. I want to create a global startup, go to Silicon Valley, grow as big as possible, and change the world. But my co-founders, my sister and brother-in-law, were more focused on building a traditional family-owned business, that supports the family, the income of the
Yeah.
family,
Yeah.
and that's it. And so it's a different ambition. So it's a different
Yes.
also ambition and amount of effort you want to give to your company. So one time we were discussing a lot because of this, because we had different visions. So I decided to step aside, to preserve the relationship with my
Yeah.
family rather than, and also I knew that I was going to be able to do something else
Yeah.
than that company.
Yeah.
But it was a great experience because also taught me that I needed to find partners, co-founders that were fully aligned on values and
Mm.
expectations, goals. And I took that as a really eh, good insight for my next attempt that was
Yeah.
UNIBAIO.
Yeah. So I talk with clients, especially like very, very early stage startups, about this a lot. The idea of you have to know what you're building. And so from the start, right? When you're going in, especially ag tech, CPG, food tech, because just as you said, the resources, the intention that go into the decisions that you make all need to root back to what we're building. And so if you want to be the best regional business in your region and you want to be known across, your state or, the Northeast or whatever it is, your region, then your intentions and your priorities and your strategies can align with that. But if it's national scale, right, then the game is changed. So, and
Mhm.
there's no wrong answer, right? It's not to say that
No,
global is bad and local is good or vice versa. It comes down
no.
to intention. What are we building? What is this for? Who is it for? And so good on you to see what value you could still get out of that and respectfully leave it to them, right, to build what was working at the time still and go on to your next big thing and intentionally make it the next big thing. So I also love the idea of, you mentioned that you needed to find partners that were aligned. And so how did you then do that? Because you mentioned UNIBIO was next. And so
Yeah.
how did that come about?
Yeah. So the naive answer will be lucky. I was lucky.
Okay, yeah.
Destiny brought my co-founders.
Yeah.
But I always say that it is not only lucky. You can do things to promote, to foster, be lucky.
Yes.
Yeah. So one thing I was doing when I was not doing a startup was trying to get closer to the startup ecosystem and entrepreneurs. So I
And
was,
so before you continue there, Matias, how
yes,
much of a gap was there? Because you left the business with your sister and brother-in-law. How long was there a gap before you found UNIBIO?
it was a long gap because it was, let me check, like 5 years.
Oh, okay. So what some time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
some time. Yes. In the meantime, I was working for an NGO that was supporting artisan in the Andes to economically develop. I was working for a fashion industry company selling fashion goods in France and the US. I was working for a biotech company then. I had a step back to government in between to double check if I was right, good
Yeah,
or not.
yeah.
It was a correct decision or not. Yeah, yeah. I don't like politics, so I didn't like going back.
Yes.
And then during that last period, I was doing, just in my free time as a hobby, interviews to entrepreneurs for a YouTube channel I had.
Ah.
So I was interviewing every week one entrepreneur in a kind of pitch session interview. So it was very short, like 5 minutes, 3 minutes each. 5 minutes the total program, 3 minutes each pitch. So I was also helping them to train how to do it, how to speak concisely. And it was fun for me because it was like training for pitching, but also getting to know a lot of innovation.
Mm-hmm.
So in late 2019, before the pandemic, I decided I wanted to do a startup again. I was decided, so I quit my last job. I needed to find excuse to go to Silicon Valley. I was supposed to be the most innovative place. So I enrolled to a coding school in San Francisco to learn
Okay.
coding because of no reason, specifically, just to have an excuse to be there
Yeah.
and connect with more entrepreneurs and people, like-minded people. So I went to US. I started studying coding. It wasn't really my thing, but I was excited to be there. I then came back to Argentina after a few months, decided to sell all my furniture, get rid of all my things, and move to the US. And the pandemic started.
Ah.
So I get stuck in Argentina without no plans and waiting to see what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I was keep doing the interviews online, like this interview to entrepreneurs. And one of these entrepreneurs every week was Vera, one of my co-founders now, and Claudia, two amazing women scientists that were studying this technology that we use at UNIBAIO. And they were telling me that they were aiming to create a company around this tech. But they realized after several years of attempts that they didn't have the expertise to do it. They were failing on doing this startup attempt or company attempt, not necessarily
Right.
a startup.
Yep.
So, because I knew one of them from before, and we were all from the same city in Argentina, I proposed myself as co-founder. And if you're looking for someone in business, maybe we should talk because I'm
Yeah.
looking for a project. I never thought about biotech. I was thinking more about software, AI, or new techs, more like traditional type of tech. More,
Yeah, sure.
and but this sounds amazing. You're working in something that is really disruptive, that it can potentially change the world. This is something that I want to do, and it's also interesting that it's locally developed. So it was also important for my original goals, like impacting my community.
Right.
So it was aligning a lot in terms of value and goals. But because I've learned from my previous experience that we need to be sure that we were aligned on goals and everything, the first discussion, that was several meetings, online meetings, but several meetings, was trying to discover if we were aligned without
Mm-hmm.
no good answer, just trying to figure out
Right. Yep.
what do they want. Do they want to build a small company? Do they are excited or afraid or building something globally? Do they
Mm-hmm.
want to do the effort? Do they want to work full time in a startup, or they don't want to keep being scientists
Mm-hmm.
working for a university and do this as a part-time job? What do they want? Because learning what they want was going to give me the insight if we were good partners or not for what I was aiming to build.
Mm-hmm.
But I was 100% sure that I wanted to build.
Yeah. And so did they, I mean, obviously you are aligned now, but at that time, was that their intention, or was it, well, we don't really know, right? Because we work with scientists a lot at the
Yeah.
agency, right? Because we have a focus in agriculture. And so I I can imagine the conversations that you were having, right? Scientists are, this is incredible technology and it's great for everyone and we just want everyone to use it. And the business mind is different, right? You have to bring a whole different perspective and
Mhm.
to the conversation. And so What was their response there? Was it, as I said, that it's that they just kind of wanted everybody to use it? It was great technology, or did they not know?
They didn't know, and indeed, it took, I think, 2 years to fully understand what we were building.
Mhm.
So at the beginning, they wasn't sure at all to do a startup. So they were learning what was a startup, what a startup means, and what's the difference with a regular company.
Yeah.
I don't think I need to clarify the difference here. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So indeed, one of the first investors they met before meeting me, they told them they didn't invest because they said, I don't feel that you are convinced on following this journey. It
Mhm.
seems that you are answering all the correct answer because you learned how to answer, because
Ah.
you are prepared to like to file a document to ask for a grant. They were learning how to answer to ask money for a VC or an angel investor, but they didn't really understand what they were committing to. So
Mhm.
the investor was clever enough, and he realized and said, "Oh, I think you are super interesting. You have an amazing team, a super cool tech, but I don't really feel that you are committed to this journey, and it's going to be tough. So if you are not 100% convinced, maybe it's not your journey, and maybe that I'm not the investor."
Uh-huh.
That was a very good feedback because that was true. I was talking with my now co-founders, and they were, "Yeah, he was right. I'm not really get what is this Silicon Valley mindset. It
Mhm.
feels like bullshit." Like,
Yeah.
so it was difficult to understand the business type of mindset when you're thinking in this way. It's like you're
Right.
putting upside down everything. You first get the investment and then you build the business, and not the other way. So that's difficult to understand if you never heard about it.
Mhm.
So we were discussing about this. I started to explain all this. It took us almost the entire 2020 to
Yeah.
discuss all about this, to make sure that they understood what we're trying to build, or at least what I was trying to build. And
Mhm.
then they started to get more excited. Oh, yeah, this makes sense. And they say, well, if you are aiming to lead this, because it's going to be a significant effort, if you're
Yeah.
aiming to travel around the world to follow this whatever needs to grow the company, we follow you, but you need to lead because we don't
Yeah.
understand. We trust on you, but it's something that sounds even better than building in terms of impact, than building a small company, but we don't know how to do it. So
Sure.
we trust on you, blind trust, we follow you. But they like also the idea of building a bigger impact because their
Mhm.
motivation as scientists to do this startup was seeing real impact of something that
Right.
was on paper, like bringing a research to
Yeah. Yeah.
something
From the
meaningful.
lab to reality.
Yes,
Yeah.
to reality. For
Yeah.
them was more like intellectual challenge. Are we
Mhm.
capable of bringing to reality this tech?
Mhm.
So for them was initially enough to create a small company, a local small company.
Mhm.
When I present like what we could potentially build together, they started to get more excited. So okay, maybe we can be more ambitious and create something bigger that has a bigger impact. That's even better. They would never thought too much about the money part. It's more about like the what it means.
Right.
So I was happy because we were aligned on goals and values. So we started to work together. We did a lot of things in the meantime, but I realized after, like 2 years after, once we were receiving our first institutional investment,
Mhm.
that they didn't really understood what was the journey.
Oh, how
In in
so?
be, yeah, in between they were saying, "Oh, this is harder than I thought. This
Ah.
is this is like doing many PhDs at the same time. This is like infinite questions you need to answer, and you always need to answer fast, and you don't have time to develop all the knowledge. You need to make
Yeah.
decisions without developing the knowledge. So it's super complicated." But it was okay. It was something that they realized that was different that they expected, that I couldn't realize sooner to explain them the
Mm.
difference.
Yeah, but I also think that there's something to be said for individual talents, right? And so you understand, which is why I always go into these shows talking about the background, right? You have a unique background that qualified you to understand what was required for the growth of that organization. They are scientists. You could not switch places. You could
No.
not go into the lab and try and develop
Yeah.
the technology. They cannot go out into the world and grow the business with the economics understanding and the scalability and the global positioning and all of that stuff. So it takes unique talents coming together for that to work. And I think it's also pretty remarkable that I know you mentioned it took all of 2020, but you built pretty fast trust there, right? For them to have you come in and them say, "Okay, you lead the company," right? Blind trust, well said. That's truly what it was for
Yeah.
them to let you in to
Hmm.
say, "Okay, this is the way we're going."
Yes, and that's amazing. Every time I think about it, it means a lot because they were working on this tech for decades.
Yeah.
They were working together for 10 years, and Claudia, our CTO, she was studying plants and the core material that we use in our tech for 40 years since she went to Davis to study in the US. So it's a life dedicated to study this. And they were offering me that
Yeah.
with a lot of trust. So it
Yeah.
means a lot.
Yeah, and I said when we came back from our little break that it probably wasn't luck, but there is a lot of luck there because you're lucky you
Yeah.
found each other, right? That because there can also be many instances where someone like that comes in, and by like that I mean somebody who says this can be a global company and we can do this and we can do that, and they have malicious intent, right? The fact
Hmm.
that you had aligned values both
Yeah.
from what do you stand for kind of mindset, as well as where do we want this company to go, was luck, that a little bit, right, that you found
Yes,
each
yeah,
other
it
in
was
that way.
definitely
Yeah.
was luck, was destiny.
Yeah.
I wasn't planning, so I have a clear idea of what I wanted to create in terms of value and goals, but wasn't a specific project. I wasn't thinking on
Yeah.
agriculture specifically
Right.
for my next startup.
Hmm.
And they came with this tech and this idea, and luckily we get connected, and luckily we were aligned because it couldn't happen neither of them. Neither we connected.
Yeah.
If the pandemic didn't happen, I was maybe been working in I don't know, in Google in AI. I don't know.
Yeah. Right.
I cannot imagine. So it's a different path. And
Yeah.
luckily we were aligned on values and goals because if we weren't, we haven't it wouldn't be possible to reach this point, like
Mhm.
developing, working together for more than 4 years
Yeah.
to build a company because it requires a lot of time to build a company.
Right, absolutely. So let's talk about some of that traction. So you've won some very impressive awards and gained some great investment. Talk a little bit about that, and then I want to talk a little bit about your business model too, because there's some interesting things that I noted that I want to ask you about. But talk about the traction a little bit first.
Yeah. So from the early beginnings, I was aiming to build a global company. So from the early beginnings, I was applying to every incubator, acceleration program that was for international startups that could help us to bring me and us to connect with international markets to understand if we were able to fulfill a need that was global and not just local in Argentina. So we started, the first program was Startup Chile in Chile. It's one of the best in Latin America. They're really good in helping startups to develop this startup mindset. So I knew they were very good, and it's good for that they connect with professional PCs.
Mm.
From there, we went to a similar program in South Korea. That was a crazy personal experience. Super interesting. Not really useful for the company, that experience itself, but it was a really good
Yeah, personally
experience.
interesting.
Very
Yeah, yeah.
personally interesting.
Yeah.
Then we went to the US to Alchemist Accelerator in San Francisco.
Mm.
They were the first one to give us some money that we invested to do our first field trials to validate that our tech in the business model we were thinking was actually working and providing value. And more
Did
recently,
you do
yes,
those field trials in the US?
we did the first one in Argentina. So now we do field trials in the US, but the first one were done in Argentina. So we were taking the advantage that the science was based in Argentina because we had Argentinian cost. So
Right.
with the money that Alchemist was giving to startups in a very early stage as money enough to pay the bills during the acceleration program in San Francisco. So it
Uh-huh.
was like to paying the housing and
Yeah.
movement.
Yeah.
We were paying field trials in Argentina.
Yeah.
So we were using that unfair advantage in our favor to
Yeah.
develop the science deeper.
Yep.
And more recently, we went through UNIBAIO acceleration program in New York.
Mm-hmm.
We received investment from Bioceres, that is a big agricultural company, public in Nasdaq. And November last year, we won Grow New York, the world competition that is sponsored by Cornell and New York State government
Yep.
to bring innovation in agriculture and food to the state. So now we are based in Ithaca. I am not in Ithaca in this moment. I came to I came to Barcelona to visit my family for a few days. But we are now based in Ithaca, in upstate New York, and we have the goal to develop our business locally with farmers, but also have more team members working in the U.S.
What a cool full circle moment for the Grow New York win, with that being an economic development competition,
Mhm.
right? Going back to your interest in government and
Yes,
your
yes.
passion in economic development. I mean, Grow New York is so. UNIBAIO won the $1 million top prize in the 2024 Grow New York competition. But that, you mentioned it's sponsored by New York State and Cornell. I mean, those parties came together under an economic development intention to attract global companies to New York State, specifically a specific region in upstate New York. And that's exactly what happened. And it is with the intention
Yeah,
of supporting the community, just as you were talking
yeah.
about doing from
Yeah,
the
it's
very beginning.
exactly the type of work that I was doing at the beginning when I
Yes.
started my journey. So for the very beginning, I was fully understanding their goals and
Yes.
why they were doing what they were doing. And it's amazing. I'm surprised in a good way that they are doing that because not many governments has the vision or the
Yes.
ambition to do these kind of programs. And I am convinced that that create development and impact. They want to create more jobs, but not just any type of jobs, like mm, jobs, well-paid jobs, like
Right.
the
High
most
quality
type
jobs. Yep.
high-quality jobs. And they also want to keep the jobs in the food and ag industry because it's
Yeah.
a traditional industry and it's going to be critical in the following decades because with climate change we need to make sure that we're going to be able to have enough food, healthy food. And New York State is bigger than just Manhattan
Mm-hmm.
and having a lot of land that is capable of producing food. If we combine it with innovation, that makes sense in the short term, but also in the long term. So it's like a very broad strategic view from the state government that I'm surprised and it's super good.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to be part of that. And of course, proud and honored to be one of the winners because there are not many.
Yeah.
So now I feel like it's also a good responsibility, but it's also aligned with my values and goals. So it's
Right.
super good.
Right. Yeah. I have recently spoken with a couple of the folks who are integral in the creation of the Grow New York competition with that economic development focus. That'd be an interesting future episode for us to bring some of those folks on who were integral to talk about that,
Yeah.
because again, not to be repetitive, but this idea of how food, beverage, and agriculture are so integrally connected to economic development, I think is a fascinating thing that is not often covered in content that's being developed. So just
Yeah.
as a side note, I think that'd be an interesting thing to do. So I want to ask you about your business model a little bit, because I noticed on the UNIBIO website you're positioning your offering as services rather than products. And so talk about that a little bit.
Yes. Good question. Indeed, during the we are always evolving. So
Yeah.
during the Grow New York competition, during the final that takes us several months, like
Yeah.
3 or 4 months, we were one of the feedback that we got was that our business model wasn't convincing the jurors. That it was too risky to have the
Mm.
main business model that we still have in our webpage. So we developed an additional business model during the Grow New York competition that now we are more excited. But so originally, our business model was mainly B2B and offering the IP, offering the know-how. Our expertise is on science development, specifically in material science. So is how to enhance formulations for agrochemical companies. So the companies that produce the crop protection products, like the medicine and nutrients that we need to grow our food, these companies develop formulations combining many different chemicals normally, but also biological ingredients. And we have a tech or a knowledge that can be applied to improve these formulations so we can get the most of them, or we can use less to have the same results. So it was always conceived like we are not going to sell anything to a farmer. We are going to sell this to chemical companies like Monsanto or Bayer, or these kind of big chemical companies, giants globally. So we can partner with them. They can license our knowledge. They can use it in one of their formulations, and they can bring a new version of an herbicide globally. And in that way, we can create this global impact that we want, because if not, it's going to take decades to convince every farmer in the world. Because it is physical, so it's difficult to reach many people. So that was the main strategy, and we are working on that. We are partnering with big chemical companies. We are in the iteration process on how to use our tech knowledge in their specific products they want to optimize, because every product is different, so it requires some kind of adaptation on our tech and knowledge to their specific product.
And the end goal there being increasing the effectiveness of the end result, right? So the ABC agrochemical company can come to you and say, I want this to be more effective. You, as a service, provide the technology to understand how to improve that effectiveness based on your understanding, and then they go and now they have a more effective tool.
We license, so it's a licensing model. We license the tech, they manufacture, they sell, and they, by every sale they make, they pay us a fee. So it's simpler and it's easier to scale up, at least theoretically. But the downside and the risky side, that was the feedback that we got from the juries, was everything in your commercial development is tied to someone else. It's not, you are going to sell only if one of these chemical companies adopts your tech, and it will depend on how fast they do it. So even though we are showing progress and we are progressing in these discussions and results with these companies, we are not under control on how long it's going to take. So it could take 1 year, 3 years, who knows? And that is too risky for a VC or a startup investor, because you need to have a specific runway to support the growth of the company. So when we got this feedback, we were thinking on this idea, but we didn't make the decision until we reached the finals. And we decided that we were able to offer a product to the farmer directly. So we decided to develop our tech as a product, like an additive, an adjuvant type of product, that the farmers can mix in their tanks where they mix the pesticide they buy to enhance these pesticides with different goals. Normally, it is reducing the cost of the chemical they're buying because they can use less and have the same results. But sometimes they have too much pressure for example, too much fungi pressure in New York area in apples. The humidity in the summer is so high that they have a lot of fungi affection on the apples. And every fungi affection is a black dot that consumers don't like in the apple. So they're wasting a lot of apple. They're wasting like between 20 and 40% of the apples because they are not perfect. And they're not perfect because of the fungi. So in this case, the value proposition is we can help you to have more perfect apples, because if the treatment you are giving to the apple to make it healthier without fungi works better, that means more good-looking apples that consumers want and pay more for it. So the value proposition there was having a higher efficacy, more control. The same kind of could happen in other crops with insects that that evolve and now they're not being controlled as good as before. Or that happens a lot with the new biological alternatives, like the organics alternatives on pesticide without using chemicals. Many of them are good ideas, but they don't have the exact efficacy than the chemicals. So having more efficacy is needed
Right.
so you can control the pest. And in some other cases, it's about regulatory pressure, like the EU. Now I'm in Europe. In Europe, it has the highest standard in chemical use in farming. There's many products around the world that cannot enter the European market if they abuse chemical. For example, bananas in Ecuador or Central America. All the bananas we eat globally are, most of them produced in the same region,
Mm-hmm.
using the same type of chemicals. And they use a lot of these chemicals. They spray these chemicals every 3 days
Mm-hmm.
during the whole year. All the time they're showering the crops with chemicals. So it's very nasty, but they don't have an option if they want to have enough production to provide global
Yeah.
consumers
Right.
the amount of banana we eat, because we eat a lot of bananas.
Right.
But now, for example, Europe banned this chemical they are using, and now they're in trouble because they say, oh, I need to find an alternative that help me use less of these chemicals, because if I don't use less of these chemicals, I will not be able to sell to European market. That is one
Yeah.
of the main markets, because in Europe they don't produce bananas. So all these things are affecting the decisions of farmers, and by enhancing the crop protection products they use, we can help them in many different ways. But we are not the solution itself. We are like the enhancer.
Right.
We turbocharge. That's what we
Right.
call our product. We
Yes.
turbocharge the solution. And it's just a powder you can mix on the tank with all
Yep.
your crop protection pesticides you use.
Right. So I'm in upstate New York, as many of our listeners know. And so the apple scenario that you shared is very common here, something we hear about a lot. Grapes is another one, right? Powdery
Hmm.
mildew
Yeah.
being an issue in grapes.
Yeah.
So, and then the bananas scenario you shared too. I watched a documentary years ago about how fragile the banana market is in the
Sorry.
world. It's
Yeah.
crazy. But
we rely on the same variable of bananas
yes,
globally. So we somehow these bananas die, we run out of bananas, and we don't have any replacement.
yes, right. I have heard this, and I don't know what the issue is with the cocoa market, but I know that the cocoa market is also very fragile and
Yes,
problematic,
I
big
know.
supply chain issues. So, a big thing about the ability for you to scale, especially with this direct to farmer option, is understanding the effectiveness of your product on their agricultural output. And so you mentioned you're doing some field trials, some in the US, some in Argentina, there may be more, but how do you go about that? Like, how are you prioritizing what field trials to do? How do you understand effectiveness so that that farmer can trust you, that they know what's going to work, and that you know what's going to work, so that you can have those conversations?
Yeah, it's complicated, and it's a continuous discussion with my advisors and the team, because we have a lot of options. Our tech is very versatile. It's not magic, so it doesn't work with everything, but it
Yeah.
can work with many different things, and most of the most common used things by farmers. So that brings a problem in the go-to-market strategy. What do we focus? What is our focus at the beginning? And you need to have a focus to do two things: to do the commercial development to convince the farmers to use it, but also to have the validation that the farmers needs.
Right.
And validation requires money and time, so it is critical to make a good decision. One thing that we did was, because of this Grow New York competition, that was a good award. Help us to focus on what are the needs on these specific regions. How can we help? So how can we help? What are the main crops?
Yep.
Grapes, apples. Which problems do these crops have? So we started to have interviews with farmers to understand their specific problems, because apple growers in Argentina, they don't use as much as fungicides as the US, because it's a
Mm-hmm.
drought region, so they don't have fungi disease. It's not because the fault of the farmer, it's just nature is different.
Right.
So we didn't know anything about the specific problems in New York area in farming. So we needed to understand that. Then when we find out that we could provide value specifically in the region, we started to focus. And now we are doing trials with Cornell, with Penn State. Then we extend that trials with the same type of chemicals to other crops relevant in the US, with tomatoes and potatoes in North Carolina State University. So we are doing local validation. But before deciding where to focus our efforts, we need to understand the market.
Right.
And to understand the market, we had so many options available that help us a little bit, has these incentives of having someone to work with. Because at the beginning was not necessarily their work, because we were at the end of the process. We have the incentive of having someone local that was helping us to understand the value proposition, the
Right.
needs of the farmer. So
Right.
through the Grow New York competition, we were able to reach many farmers in the region that we were able to interview and to learn the needs so we can adapt the value proposition and then develop the go-to-market strategy and the new business development, validate it, do the science, develop the product, scale the product, and
Right.
now sell the product.
Yeah, yeah. And to your point too, from an economic standpoint, understanding when do the economics work, right? Because you
Yeah.
many of what you're mentioning are specialty crops. I'm sure that's quite intentional, right? That to
Mhm.
go specialty crops as opposed to commodity to
Yeah.
start. So we're running low on time. I'd love to double this and I have so many other questions that I'd love to ask you about. So I'm trying to
Yeah.
kind of prioritize this
I
a
can
little
go
bit.
fast. Yeah.
But it seems to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong here on this one, but it seems like there are quite a few biotechnology products that are coming into the market in the last handful of years. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that, number one? And number two, how do you differentiate?
Yeah, that's great. I'm super excited about them. We think that the future is going to be biological. Very likely it's going to, nowadays, like around the most optimistic data is around 10% of the market is shared by biologicals. So most of what farmers use globally is chemicals. Yet, hopefully in the future will be the other way. Will be 90% biologicals, 10% chemicals. We are going to use only chemicals in the case where non-biological is developed yet, because disease are evolving all the time. So
Right.
chemicals are super fast to kill something. So we are the time it takes to develop a new biological alternatives is faster than the nature develop new disease. So probably we are not going to be able to get rid of all chemicals in the future, but we're going to be almost fully organic if we can. That is going to take probably a few decades. It's not going to be fast. Like electric cars. We have a lot of electric cars, but it is not yet only electric cars. It's going to take decades. In the transition, we are super relevant because we can help to use less chemicals and also help to adopt more biological alternative faster. I don't see them as competitions because, as I mentioned, we are not the specific solution for any pest. We enhance others' solutions. So we are partnering with many of these new development made by big chemical companies that has their own portfolio in biologicals, and we're helping them to improve these products so they can have faster penetration in the market. And we're also helping the most innovative companies, the startups, working with innovation like RNA or peptides or many like two in the edge for the big chemical companies, that hopefully we can help them to have this additional efficacy to be economically viable and then grow a business around the tech. So we are doing that. At the same time, we're working with big chemical companies on chemicals, with the small companies on new innovation. And we see ourselves as partner with all of them. So that's a huge differentiation. There is no many companies like us that you can work with many others at the same time to develop and enhance. So our value proposition is pretty unique. We are not alone. There's others, as we have different type of the niche will be formulation tech. So techs that can help to improve formulation. As all these companies focus on formulation techs like us, has different type of core tech, we can also be complementary. So I don't necessarily see them as competition neither. So I also partner with some of them, trying to see if we are compatible, if we can combine to get even more results. I think we are still in a time that we have more to win if we cooperate than by competing. So it's competition theoretically, but this is starting to grow. So we have more to win if we cooperate and to help to adopt this kind of techs faster.
Right. Yeah. And that dual focus that you're talking about, and you've talked about focus in a lot of different ways. I'm talking about the dual focus that you have from the formulation support that is the B2B model, and then the direct to consumer model with the farmers. I think that there are times where that focus on multiple customers can actually be a distraction, right? And so it's so critical to have the
Yes.
balance
That
of
was also part of the discussion. And
yes.
so we never did, so we didn't do this double approach from the beginning because it was
Right.
too much to do and deviate the attention. Now we realize that we can do both because we have developed the science to a point that we can use the same core tech for both business development and commercial strategies. So we are not dabbling the science. That is the most expensive part in our company. So we are using economic of scale. It's the opposite. We are using the same core tech, the same team to have double revenue source. And we are using the validation that we do with the big chemical companies to decide where to focus in direct to farmer.
Right.
Because when we learn that something works, then we can develop the product for the farmer specifically. And then when we convince a farmer to use our tech as a product, like as an upstream, we also use these commercial data to accelerate the decision making on the big chemical companies. So the two business models are retroalimenting. It's fostering one to another. And then we think it's going to help us to accelerate our development and not to deviate effort.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is the piece that's essential, right? Is that they feed each other and not that they're two totally different paths, right? So good on you to have that focus.
Yes.
I'm not surprised with your business understanding. So last question for you. What is next for UNIBAIO specifically, especially as it relates to your global positioning as a global company?
We are happy that we're launching this year in Argentina turbocharge, our additive that the farmers can use in the farm directly to enhance the pesticide they're using. And in the US in the next season, we were aiming to reach this season, but we couldn't. It was difficult with the EPA and the FDA.
Yeah.
There's a lot of backlog, so we couldn't reach the goal of April. It's going to be next season. We're happy about that. So this year, we're going to start seeing farmers using our tech. And we started also collaboration with big food industry companies, like the ones who produce food sourcing from farmers.
Yep.
That they also want to use our tech in global markets to source from different places in the world. So if all this is going to come in the following year, all focus on the direct to farmer approach.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can also have the first licensing agreement this year with one of the big chemical companies. That will be huge and that will scale a lot our impact.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love your story. Thank you for taking some time to talk with me today and share your story and UNIBAIO's story. And it's inspiring to see you executing that on the global stage, just as you intended. So congratulations.
Thank you, Maureen. It's my pleasure. Sorry for all the technical problems.
No worries.
Anytime you want, I'm here to talk.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Spilled Salt. I'm your host, Maureen Ballatori. Spilled Salt is an Agency 29 production. Agency 29 is a brand-building firm for food, beverage, and agriculture brands. Learn more at agency29.com. For more information about the podcast, visit spilledsaltpodcast.com. Use that website to send me questions or recommendations for future guests. I always love hearing from you. Spilled Salt is available anywhere you enjoy your podcasts. Please like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.